I'm happy this weekend to be able to offer a reflection on the gospel. We hear the story of Jesus healing the man with the unclean spirit, and we come to recognize the power of God working in and through Jesus. I'll begin with this cute story told about a grandfather who went often to visit his granddaughter, Susan. But this was the first time Susan and her parents were going to visit Grandpa in his home. They were taking this long trip to see Grandpa, who was also a deacon at his local church. And this would be the first time that she and her parents would also see Grandpa in action at church. As the service opened, little Susan saw her grandfather, now in his role as deacon, processing down the aisle, as she called it, in his gown and stole. And tugging at her mother's arm, Susan said, "What's Grandpa pretending to be?" In the gospel, Jesus is not pretending to be one who speaks with power. He was the power of God made flesh in the person Jesus. And oddly, the man with the unclean spirit, he's the first to recognize the power of God in Jesus. And then he asks the question, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth?" As we hear in the story today, this man tormented by the demon, and we don't know what the demon was. Was it emotional, physical, spiritual? Was it some addiction? We don't know what it was, but he's healed by the simple command and the incredible power of Jesus' words, "Quiet, come out of him." Everyone, we're told, was completely amazed, and they couldn't wait to tell others what they saw. Evil was a powerful force in their world, but here in the story we see Jesus is more powerful. Wouldn't it be great if we, as the followers of Christ, had the same power? If somehow we had so much power, we could drive out all the really bad stuff and bad people from our world. Imagine a world without crime, the murders, the carjackings that we're seeing recently, no abusers or drug pushers or armed robbers. A world without all those things would certainly be a better place for sure. But we do not have that same kind of power. What I want us to think about is this. It's a mistake to presume that most of the pain and suffering in this world is caused by all of these big, terrible, dramatic, obvious things. In dealing with that big stuff, it does matter. But what I want us to remember today is what remains. It's all the little stuff we don't always think causes much harm. Think about the relationships that suffer, damaged by thoughtlessness and lies, indifference, and infidelity. Some people in the workplace still find ways to defraud customers, to fix the books, or beat the system. Some students are still going to cheat on tests, or they bully others, and they test their parents' patience. Many people still gossip and put down and express prejudice and jealousy of their neighbors. Some still would put everyone into categories, who's in and who's out. And so if we think about the sum of all the small stuff we do, day in and day out, multiplied by billions of people around the world, we realize it's not just the big stuff that makes the world less than it can be, but it's that pile of relatively small hurts and failings and sins that also have a negative effect on the world we live in. And that brings me back to the question in the gospel. What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? The man with the unclean spirit recognizes the power of Jesus. Do we? I think Jesus reminds us today that there are things we clearly have the power to do something about. And it begins first with us, recognizing who Jesus is for us and how Jesus calls us to be Christ for one another. And so you see, friends, a better world starts with one person at a time, not other people, but rather with the person each of us sees in the mirror every day. So maybe we need to work with Jesus, to ask Jesus to help us find the strength and power within to drive out whatever is in us, whatever it is that keeps us from being the light, the joy, the hope that Jesus wants us to be. A perfect world, it doesn't seem possible. A better world is possible. I think we were reminded of this in a very beautiful way at the inauguration just a little over a week ago. A young woman, Amanda Gorman, just 22 years old, who overcame a speech impediment herself, wrote a beautiful poem that she was asked to share at the inauguration. If you saw it, you'd remember. And she used these beautiful words, just this short little quote from the poem. There is always light, if only we are brave enough to see it, if only we are brave enough to be it. There is always light, if only we are brave enough to see it, if only we are brave enough to be it. And with those words, she reminded everyone of our responsibility to be the hope for change in our world. Today, the story in the gospel reminds us Jesus has put the power of his light and love into us. Now, you and I must put it onto the world, a world that is in great need of it. In the question, do we recognize that power of Jesus that is working in and through us? And are we brave enough to be the light for one another?